Sure, Lillard has some incredible individual performances on his resume, but so does English. So do guys like Tom Chambers and Dominique Wilkins. And again, only the most hardcore basketball fans ever talk about these guys.
Facts. Yeah. Dame is definitely going to be one of the ones that's going to be forgotten, I feel like, as well. I can agree with this. But I feel like, I'm saying, when I get a little older, I'm definitely going to be talking about Dame. Like, y'all don't know nothing about Dame Dollar, boy. What? Pulling it from 50 feet back, you know what I'm saying? 40 feet back, 45 from the parking lot, you know what I'm saying? Step back, Dame time, you know? I'm telling you, I'm really gonna be, I'll be on my own shit.
Now
I see the title, man, let's get to it.
I realize that this video's thumbnail and title may be triggering to some of you, but I honestly think that if you hear my thought process behind this video, you'll understand where I'm coming from, and you might even have some suggestions of your own.
Keep the feelings out of it, bro. Like, if it triggers you, so what, bro? You gotta understand where people are coming from and the reality of the situation. The reality, man. Like, people don't even want to see the reality of this
I've been
shit,
following
man.
the NBA for a long time. I'm quickly approaching my mid-30s, and I've been obsessively watching the game since I was about 5 years old. Based on that fact, my watched experience goes all the way back to the mid-90s. But the truth is, I was actually watching games from long before that. Back in the day, we didn't have TiVo, YouTube, or even the internet. If there was a remarkable game or highlight that you wanted to rewatch, then you had to record it on VHS tapes. That's exactly what my dad did to an obsessive extent, as he recorded every playoff game, all-star game, and some regular season games on VHS tapes throughout the 80s and 90s. This was the root of my passion for basketball, as I was addicted to these tapes.
That's tough. Yo, I wish I had some tapes like that. Well, you could rewatch everything. You can play me. I mean, tough.
And while other 5-year-old children were watching things like Barney, I was busy watching my dad's tapes of 1980s basketball on repeat. And to this day, I still have cardboard boxes full of VHS tapes of past generations. That's how I'm so familiar with eras that I technically didn't live through, but I certainly feel like I did. All this goes to say, I've seen a lot of NBA basketball throughout the years, and I've witnessed the narratives and perceptions change about players as time has gone on. I've seen guys be considered as top 5 players in the game, just to be forgotten and only discussed by the most hardcore basketball fans 20 years later. Since I've been watching the sport for so long, I think I've started to recognize the trends, and players who may seem like famous superstars that everybody knows about, but decades from now, general audiences won't be talking about them as much. Obviously, you guys will remember these players since you lived to watch them. But trust me, 20 to 30 years from now, you'll be in my position, and you'll discover that general audiences don't talk about them as much as they should.
Facts. That's a fact. But we gonna see what players he lists, but this is definitely gonna be.
So now, here's my short list of players who won't be remembered decades from now. First off, Damian Lillard. Let me first clarify, since Lillard is an active player, he's subject to change, as he may very well join a super team, win a championship, and add accolades to his legacy in the near future. But as things currently stand, he is the perfect candidate for a player who won't be talked about decades from now. The way I see him is that he's a modern day version of Alex English in the 1980s, who's a player that only the most hardcore basketball fans ever talk about. Obviously, these two players were at different positions. They had different builds, and they had vastly different play styles. But when it comes to the aspects that make up a legacy, they're pretty darn similar. Damian Lillard was one of the best scorers of his generation, and so was Alex English, as no player scored more total points than English in the 1980s. Both athletes were the best players for their respective small market teams for many, many years, but neither superstar ever won an NBA championship. Neither star has any MVPs or very much hardware in general. Neither player was considered as a quality defender, and both players were overshadowed by other superstars with more stacked teams. Sure, Lillard has some incredible individual performances on his resume, but so does English. So do guys like Tom Chambers and Dominique Wilkins. And again, only the most hardcore basketball fans ever talk about these guys.
Facts. Yeah. Dame is definitely going to be one of the ones that's going to be forgotten, I feel like, as well. I can agree with this. But I feel like, when I get a little older, I'm definitely going to be talking about Dame. Like, y'all know nothing about Dame Dollar, boy. What? Pulling it from 50 feet back, you know what I'm saying? 40 feet back, 45 from the parking lot, you know what I'm saying? Step back, Dame time, you know? I'm telling you, I'm really gonna be, I'll be on my own and shit.
Now things could change. If he wins an NBA championship, then he'll certainly be immortalized. Or even just a trip to the NBA Finals and a historic performance could possibly give him the Allen Iverson treatment. Now this doesn't apply to Blazer fans and diehard basketball fans, because you're still the minority in the grand scheme of things. If Lillard is going to have a legacy that lasts for decades to come, then something needs to change within his resume.
Facts. He has to win something, you know? He has to win something of elite value, you know? Because, damn, Dame is really an elite player, bro. He's an elite shot maker, explosive. He don't really play D, but, you know, elite shot maker. He got some handles. Bro, he's tough, bro.
It needs to change soon. Second up is Paul George.
For
a while, this player has been considered as one of the best two-way players in the entire league, and he was even considered as an MVP candidate for a short period of time. But guess what? Many other great players of the past can make those same claims, but have since been forgotten. Players like Sidney Moncrief, Nate Thurmond, and Alvin Robertson were elite two-way players in their day, yet they're rarely mentioned in the modern era. Oftentimes, players' legacies are sustained by the iconic images that we remember them for. Without a single NBA Finals appearance, and with such a poor track record in game-winning situations, unfortunately, George won't have many iconic highlights that will stand the test of time. Think about it. Consider your favorite legend from the NBA's past and picture one iconic highlight that you remember from their career.
Only thing PG really got is the weight. Pull it from, you know what I'm saying, the logo. You got that shot. That was a crazy, iconic shot. But it wasn't really that great. You know, it wasn't really any greatness to it. It was just pretty tough, pretty fire, pretty iconic, I guess you could say. But you also had the 360 windmill, reverse 360 windmill in game. That was tough, you know. But besides those two moments, everything else is. Oh, he also went crazy, bring the Thunder back in that one game. But other than that, you know what I'm saying, there's nothing else. Nah, I promise you, nothing else. You know, other than that, it's over. My fault. He dunked on Birdman. That was fake tough in the finals against the Heat. I'm sorry. But other than that, it's over. Other than that, it's over. Four good moments in your career. You know what I'm saying? And I remember that because I lived in this time. So,
when did it take place, and what was the situation? Without the gravity of the moment, even great players can appear as basic stats when enough time has passed. Also, I hate to be this brutal, but I would argue that from a legacy standpoint, the most memorable aspect of George's career was his Pandemic P nickname, based on his lackluster performance in the 2020 postseason. 20 years from now, people probably won't be talking about that, but the image of him clanking the side of the backboard is certainly ingrained in my memory. I'm not trying to be harsh, I'm trying to be honest. Legends are remembered mostly for three things: rings, records, and moments. Without any of those three things working in your favor, you're basically swimming up.
I ain't gonna lie, Dame got a few, these players got a few moments. They got a few moments, you know? A few great moments.
But I don't think it's when it comes to building your legacy.
I feel what you're saying. It might not
Last
be enough,
on the list is Joe Johnson. Joe was one of the great one-on-one players who was extremely skilled offensively. He's the only retired player on this list, but in many ways, I think he also fits this criteria. He had a lot of quality traits that should be remembered. For one, he was incredibly difficult to stop in his prime. averaging as high as 25 points per game in 2007. What I personally appreciate about him is how he was one of the most clutch shot makers in the history of the game, and I say that with zero hesitation. It depends on how you define a game-winning shot, but based on the most common definitions, Johnson is either in the top 5 or the top 10 spots for the most game-winning shots in NBA history. Unfortunately, I don't think this is something that general audiences will know about a couple decades from now, because ISO Joe never received much hardware, and none of his teams ever made it to the NBA Finals. Most of his greatest moments simply came in regular season games, on teams that were good, but were almost never expected to win a championship. In a similar fashion to an extremely clutch player like Baron Davis, I think the appreciation of Johnson will dwindle over time, as his impact slowly starts to appear as empty stats on teams that were almost never serious contenders. So what do you guys think? Who's a star player that people will almost never be talking about 20 years from now?
Let me try to think of a player that people won't be talking about 20, 30 years from now. Let me think. Give me a second. Give me a second. I'm trying to think about all these players that's in the league. James Harden might be one of those players that people end up forget. Well, maybe not just because of his step back move. You know, people may still talk about that. It might, because that might have started something. You know, these kids love these step backs, but maybe James Harden. Trying to think someone else. James Harden. That's the only person I really could think of. Maybe D Rose might be forgotten just because all the how long he played after his injury and you know. Let me know some players y'all think in the comments, bro. Let me know, because I'm struggling over here. Word. Turn on post notifications though. Click on the last reaction. Share the video with your people, social media platforms. And I'm out of here, man. I'm out of here.